I'm really excited about this. Today, we have a great program brought to you by the Mental Health Committee. As many of you know, the Mental Health Committee was started in 2020, and the firm has made it an ongoing priority. The members of the committee initially started off, it was Rosa and Ken, and they brought me in, and we have subsequently brought in Marnie to help and advise us. And we have been tasked with putting together various programs. Some of the things that we've done over the year have included creating a mental health policy, training for management, and putting together programs like this, which I'm really excited about. We've partnered before with Dr. Janet Taylor, and this is the first with Ken, but I'm really excited about. So Ken is a former linebacker of the Washington Redskins, which I think is now formally known as Washington Redskins. Now the Washington football. This is like Ye, right? Kanye West, or the artist formerly known as Prince. So the team formerly known as Washington Redskins. He went to UC Berkeley and was drafted out of college to go play for the Arizona Cardinals. He was a first-round draft pick, 12th overall, played for the Cardinals for 6 seasons, and went on to play for the team formerly known as the Washington Redskins, played there until the start of the 1999 season. He is a 4-time Pro Bowler. So needless to say, he's very accomplished in the world of football. By the time he left the sport, he was averaging about 9 sacks a season, which is a pretty tremendous accomplishment. He has been nominated by the Washington Redskins as one of the 80 greatest players for the team. He has also been inducted into the club ring for the Washington Redskins players, which is acknowledging what a great player he is. Obviously, he's been nominated 5 times to the Football Hall of Fame. And not to be outdone in your continuing career, motivational speaking, he does consulting. He also is an author. In fact, he authored a book with a former colleague and friend, Terry Crews, a children's book, which is super cool. But not to be outdone, we also have Dr. Janet Taylor, who is a superstar in her own right. We really like Dr. Janet. We're very fortunate that we are able to work with her as well. Dr. Janet, as we know her, has helped us out doing some training in the past, but Dr. Janet is a licensed psychiatrist. She got her MD from the University of Louisville. She went on to medical school in New York and ultimately got her master's in public health from Columbia. So she's a super smart lady. She has been on CNN, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and she also is an author of a book recently came out, The Courageous Classroom. So we are very lucky to have both of them today. I think you've heard enough from me, so I am going to hand over the virtual stage to Ken. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Trying to look and sound intelligent, so thank you very much. Hey, just wanted to first off say thank you guys for allowing me to speak. I'm a former football player, and you might be looking at yourself saying, "Why? I don't care. I never did like the Washington football team. I'm a Dolphin fan or whatever fan, so you can care less about football." But what I am here is because we all have stories to tell and stories about our lives and different things that have affected us. I happen to be on a platform that a lot of people saw. And so there may be interest to know that even people on these platforms have issues and that they're dealing with things. And I think that's probably sometimes the bigger problem is that as people get on their own platforms in their own world, in their own sections, we have things that we deal with, and oftentimes we have to deal with it by ourselves. So we deal with it in such a small circle that we don't get a chance to talk about it, or we don't feel comfortable talking about it, or someone, you're afraid of what that, saying whatever it is, people may make fun of it. So The reason I'm here is just that. I'm gonna tell you quickly about my story, about my life, my journey into the NFL, and then I'll tell you just some analogies that I've used in the area of mental health. So me, young man from Austin, Texas. I did grow up a Cowboy fan, so kind of ironic that I ended up playing with the Washington football team. But from Austin, Texas, and went through a point in my life where I ended up dropping out of school. And during the time where I dropped out of school, as you can imagine, like most problems, they seem compounded. You seem like there's so much in your world and you don't know who to talk to. Everyone's trying to point the finger and say, oh, you should do this, you should do that, or everyone's saying that you're not this or you're not that. And life can sometimes get compounded and pushed into a point where you don't know what to do. And me being young, me not knowing who to talk to, me not being able to really kind of diagnose where I was at, for me at that time of my life, my only option, at least I felt, was that the world would be better without me. This was my life. I felt like the world would be better without me. And I think the cool part is that you can see on the other side of that decision, that moment in my life, that the world wasn't better without me. The world needed me in some ways. I've done something in some ways. And so it's not, we look at life sometimes and you get compounded and everything gets squished into a little ball and you start making decisions that aren't necessarily the right decisions, but you make them based off of all the pressures around you. And for me, I was like, okay, you know what? Life is better without me being here. So as a young man in my 17 years old, I tried to take my life. I took a bunch of pills, drank about a lighter fluid, took some other pills, did some other stuff, and it didn't work. Fortunately, it didn't work. But at that moment in my life, I started realizing that that I'm supposed to be here, that there's a reason for me to be here, that there's a purpose for me to be here. And then beyond that, you start realizing that all this things, all the reasons that you are supposed to be here, you would have missed out on, or people would have missed out on you. That moment where it seems so strong, there's so much more out there in the world. Fast forward through all that, I end up going back to school, getting my degree, finishing up. But then as a dropout, you try to figure out, how you're going to get to college, because I wanted to kind of prove to everybody that I wasn't dumb, wasn't unintelligent. And so I ended up I met a guy in the gym. He told me about a junior college in Oakland, California. Went to Oakland, California, saved up a bunch of money. Met another guy. Wasn't like those stories where people paid you to come play, because I never got paid. I was looking for it. I never got paid. I had to save up money. And me and another guy, we went to Oakland, California, played there for 2 years, got a scholarship to University of California, Berkeley, played there for 2 years, then ended up getting drafted as the 12th pick in the first round by the Arizona Cardinals, played 11 years. I had an 11-year career. I will give you all of that to say there's all the good stuff, but then there's also the negative stuff too. During that time, my wife and I had our first child, passed away from SIDS. The public eye is on you, and we're fighting with each other because we don't know. We're young parents and we're walking around depressed. And fortunately, we had a good source of people to talk to. Because I think one of the biggest problems is not having people to talk to. And so we had some people to talk to and to kind of work us and help us to get through it, whether it was support groups, whether it was your friends, we had some people to talk to. Tore my ACL, tore my rotator cuff, tore all that stuff. And so everyone thought my career was over with. And actually it just got better beyond that. But all those setbacks happen, but you learn the lesson that, it's not over. Things can happen. Things could be at their worst moments ever, but you'll get through a cloudy day. You'll get through a rainy day. But part of that is understanding what to do and where to go and who to talk to. I'm also talking to you because a lot of former NFL players, or you've read, I shouldn't say a lot, but some former NFL players have committed suicide. One of the first things that people talk about is once you stop playing football, 80% of the players experience some form of depression. I kind of nod my head like, yeah, duh, because you've been doing something all your life. You've been focusing on something all your life. And now all of a sudden it stops. The door closes. What you were great at is no longer possible. And so you do experience some form of depression. But the harder thing is beyond that is that you have trained yourself, your body, your mind, your soul is always pushed to keep going on, that nothing can stop you. You're going to keep going, you're going to keep pushing, you keep moving, and you can overcome anything. That's the greatest thing. And so when your brain isn't working right, when you start having some mental problems, then all of a sudden now that 6'2", 265-pound linebacker is now afraid and he's scared. But you don't know who to talk to because the world out there seems like they have a version or vision of you, and you don't know who to talk to. And so there are a lot of players who you start seeing yourself deteriorate, seeing yourself not being who you used to be. And then on the other side of it, you're scared because now you don't know who to talk to. So I had 3 areas that I've always used with football analogies, but it applies to life. And there's 3 things that can stop you from being who you need to be, success and whatever. And those 3 things are fear, complacency, and lack of education. But let's talk about fear, because fear, I think, is probably one of the biggest factors of a lot of things. Fear of what society's going to think of you. Back in the day, we used to think that if someone talked about mental health, the images with them being in an asylum, them being in a crazy home, them being the person who's the reject, them being whatever. You used to have this image of a person when you talked about mental health. And that image has stuck. If you're, I don't know, whatever age you are, the image is imprinted in your mind. And so it's hard to get beyond that to go and say, hey, I need some help. I'm dealing with this issue. It's gotten a little bit better. But you think 1 year compared to all these other years where, people were burnt at the stake. People were, ostracized. People were put out in whatever because they mentioned or they said or they were a little bit different because they were trying to deal with something. And that's not just me. That includes moms who, after childbirth. That includes people in relationships. There are so many things that can scar our lives. And we deal with it. We have to deal with it, or we deal with it internally. And we don't know who to talk to or which direction to go. I speak to you as a football player, and I might seem like I had this image, and that may be the reason I didn't talk to anybody. But that image is the same as a mother who's her husband thinks she's okay, and the kids think she's okay, and the neighbors think she's okay, but deep down inside, she's not okay. That image is the same as a person at work who everybody's like, you know what, he's just a little grumpy. He's got, he has a bank account. He's doing well in the firm. He's doing this, and that. And no one knows that you're dealing with something yourself. And so fear prevents us a lot of times from reaching out and talking to others. It prevented me for the longest from reaching out and talking to someone. It took until this year and last year, and especially with COVID, it's kind of opened the door for a lot of people to talk, but also a lot of people to wall themselves off. The NFL offered some programs, and so I started reaching out to counselors to talk to somebody because I wanted them to know me beyond what people thought I was. I wanted them to know the real me. But I've made so many mistakes on my own, trying to figure it out on my own, self-diagnosing myself, that I've gone down wrong paths, down wrong areas. And so now I'm spending 4 or 5 years banking on something that was the wrong path and trying to do it myself. And so I keep saying myself, when you're dealing with mental health, a lot of times we think self when we need others to help us. That's about the teamwork. We need others to help us. And I've always been that self-sufficient, self-strong, self-whatever. I don't need anybody, or I've been fearful. And regardless of how big you are, how strong you are, how small you are, how pretty you are, how whatever you are, it's okay to say that you need some help. I know there's a lot of fear out there. Part of it, even with me talking to somebody, it's like I look on news and everyone's trying to write a book about somebody. Everyone's trying to come out and say, oh, I had to do, I talked to so-and-so, and they'll post it on Instagram, Facebook, all these other places. Everyone wants to be famous off of someone else's story. And so there's a big fear because you're like, man, if I tell somebody, who are they going to tell them? What are they going to tell them? And all that stuff. But the good thing is that doctors can't say anything. They're not supposed to say anything. So that's that safety zone of saying, hey, if I talk to you, Is it going to reflect on me and my job? You know, will they come back and will they fire me because I said this to you? Will they say something about this is the things that I'm dealing with? Or are they going to judge me? All those things are in there, and people become fearful to talk. Like I said, I'm the prime example. I'm 56 years old, and it took me all this time to finally start talking to somebody, to talk to at least someone who knew what they were talking about. I have friends, and we all have friends, but you know, your boys are gonna agree with you half the time. We'll joke and we'll agree and we'll laugh, and sometimes it's just good just to get out and just to laugh. But sometimes you need that help beyond just a laugh. Sometimes you need that little bit of direction that's gonna help you get to the right path. Sometimes it's medication. Sometimes it's a prolonged therapy where they can get to the root of the problem. I've had issues where on the surface it looks like one thing, and then afterwards you have to get down and you figure out, well, whoa, it wasn't that. This is the root of the problem, and it's something totally different than I thought it was. You know, for me, the root of a lot of my problems have been insecurities. Who would think? You know, all the accolades, right? 6'2", 260 pounds, you know, a 4-time Pro Bowl, 11-year career. And you're saying your biggest fear is insecurities. That's your root problem. But that spawned a whole bunch of things off of me, you know, my root problem. So I will say fear is the number one thing. And I will encourage anyone who's listening to this. It's hard not seeing people and seeing their body languages and smiles or frowns or getting off your computer. It's hard talking without knowing who's in the other side of it. But I will say to anyone, the hardest thing is that first step, to overcome that first step and say, you know what? I don't care who looks at me. I don't care who talks about me. I don't care what people say. I'm going to make that first step to seek to get help because I'm the most important person in the world. And that's what I had to learn, is that you, whoever you are, me, myself, you're the most important person in the world. And you need to take care of you. And there are tools and vehicles and ways to take care of yourself, but you have to make the first step. No one's going to grab you by the shoulder and push you into it. You have to make the first step. And that's a hard thing because it feels like 1,000 pounds on your shoulders. You got to walk in there and you got to make that move. And man, it is weighty, but that's what fear is, because once you do it, you start realizing like, wow, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Oh man, I'm not the only person dealing with this. Wow. Okay. I now I can see why. What can I do to help? Now you got a pathway to go with that. Complacency is the second thing. Complacency is that good is good enough. You know, this is normal. And normal could mean in what TV tells you, what your family history tells you, what your race tells you. That's normal. That's complacency. For us, for me, in our family, we always had a crazy aunt. We always had the crazy uncle. You know, that's just crazy uncle. He's sitting up there, you know, you expected him. You expected somebody to be at every party to be that way. You expected the auntie to just sit there and just, you know, just start babbling about stuff. And you're like, that's just part of her. And everybody kind of leaves in the corner and that's just it. You always expected that. So when you grew up, that's, you know, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen to somebody. And you look at somebody and you say, that's the way it's supposed to be. That happens. Complacency is to do nothing. It's just to say whatever you deem as normal, it's the same thing over and over again. And you don't have to make any moves in any direction to change it. And that's an enemy, because that stops people or prevents people from making a difference, from taking that first step. When you just think things are normal, things are okay, it stops. My wife, she said she wanted to go see a counselor about some issues. On my side, my family, one, it's embarrassing. You don't go and do that. Two, you know what? I just suck it up and deal with it. That's the way I was trained with football. Just suck it up and deal with it. You don't have any problems. You don't have any issues. And then my background in the African American community, you know what? You don't talk to anybody about that, because if you do, you're going to get labeled and you're going to be this and that. And so you don't talk to it. Or if you're rich, it's not that you need help. It's like every rich person is supposed to go see a therapist. You know, they all just go see therapists, and it's just more of a kids in a wonderland. They just give them a couple of little things, give them some pills, and the day is done. That's the image you have from TV. You know, if you're from a different country, you may have another image of what mental illness is, but all that kind of plies together. So you just say, you know what, that's normal. And you don't do anything about it. You just think that that's the way life is. So complacency is another thing. Then the last one is lack of education. You know, we are getting better as a society to educate ourselves on what mental health is. And that more than not, a lot of people need it. And sometimes it's just you need someone to talk to, but we're educating ourselves to get a little bit better, to know that there is a need for mental health. At one time in our lives, it was always just suck it up and deal with it. But we all need that. And I'm realizing more and more with this pandemic, we're starting to see, if anything, we get a taste of what some people go through, that feeling of isolation, emptiness. You can be the most loneliest person in a crowded room. And I've been that, you know, I've been kind of like that shy, quiet guy, and a room full of people, celebrities, whoever, and you're there by yourself, and you feel like you're the loneliest person because you don't know who to talk to, you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to reach out to. It is a lonely, lonely world in existence of being like that. And so I think with the pandemic, we kind of realized that, you know, being by yourself and isolated is hard, and having no one to talk to. I mean, this morning, I got a physical the other day. I got some health issues, and so I'm depressed. I was driving in my car, and I'm just like, I got to get out of here. I'm depressed, and so I end up calling a buddy of mine. I'm like, man, I just need somebody to talk to. I just need somebody to just to say what I'm going through. And I was able to talk to him. And for him, he just like, okay, dude, man, I'll pray for you, but you know, that's it. And I'll talk to you. And I just needed someone to say something to. But there's so many people who have no one, or so many people who, when they have someone, they're trying to do good, but their first thing is to try to solve the problem, to give you an answer, to say, this is what you need to do. And that's not necessarily the right answer. Sometimes you just need someone to listen to you, or to point you in the right direction, and maybe be like bumpers. And so that's kind of my life, you know, as a life of a former NFL player. That part of it was my life. The post, you know, the football career was great. It was really good. But the biggest problem sometimes is having to deal with the stardom that comes with it, because now you don't know who to trust and who to talk to. And I didn't trust anybody. Getting beyond that, post-career, you know, depression. Who am I? What am I? What am I supposed to be doing with myself? Physical, you know, your physical body, there are changes that go on as you get older. The medication, your drinking, all that stuff can play into changing your mental health. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help, but all those things can affect who you are. Getting pounded in the head a couple of times, or pounding people in the heads a couple of times, could affect, you know, the way you think. Chemicals, you know, all that can affect your brain patterns. All those things can affect who you are. And so trying to self-diagnose, which we often do, or, you know, making a rash judgment, can just lead you down a path of many, many years of going down the wrong path. And like I said, I did that. I did probably 20 some years after football, just wandering around in the wasteland, just trying to figure out who am I, what am I, and just holding everything in by myself. And I will say, one bad habit, decisions, holding things in, leads to another thing, leads to another thing, leads to another thing. And the cycle, it just goes downhill. It may not be like, you know, overnight, but it slowly happens. You know, I'm depressed, so I start drinking. So now I'm starting to mess up at work. Now I'm starting to mess up at work. I lose my job. Now I lose my job. I drink more. Now I'm drinking more. My brain is affected by it, so I'm taking other drugs because I want to shut things out. The cycle goes downhill, downhill. And you look at that person and say, well, that person just has some issues, but it could have been solved way up here as opposed to way down there. And so that's what I look at. I look at my former football players, my buddies. You know, some of them done well, but some of them, it's hard to go to your buddy who has an image of you, you're so and so. You played all these years. You were the toughest man on the field, and to look at them and say, "Hey, man, I got this problem. I'm having to deal with this. I don't know how to. I don't know how to. I don't know how to say this. I'm waking up in the middle of the nights. I'm up and down. I got these super highs, but then I got these super lows. It's hard to talk to someone and say that, and that's why, fortunately, the law firm has made an effort to help. A lot of companies, and I'm not, no one was paying me to give a promo for the company, but a lot of places don't do that, don't care. You mess up, you're out of here. I don't care about your well-being. A lot of football teams, you mess up, you're out of here. I don't care about your well-being. It's what you can do for me. How can you perform? What can you do? I don't care about the pressures. I don't care about whatever you say that is excuse. It's just an excuse. Shut up, get to work. Do your job and do your job well. And if you can't do your job, I'll find somebody else. Fortunately, you have a group of people that care about you enough to set this up. And not that I'm the person, me speaking and all like that is signs that they're great, but it's ongoing programs. It's continuation. You can do a one and done. If me doing the speech was the only thing that they had for you, yeah, that's like someone saying take a pill and don't worry about it, and it's one and done. It's continuation, it's continual help, it's continual saying I'm going to reach out. If I will stress anything to the group, is that you have to take a first step, one direction or another. Have that conversation with somebody. It's scary to have that conversation with somebody, and that other person on the other end of the conversation, yourself, whether it be yourself or someone else, may not want to listen to it. It's hard. I was pausing because I was thinking there's a person that I need to talk to, and I'm trying to think, like, how do you talk to that person and say, hey, maybe you need to seek some help. Maybe you need to talk to somebody. Maybe you need to stay on the pills that they've given you, because you've been on those pills and they work, but we, like human nature is working. I don't need to take them anymore. And the prescription is to continue to take it. I've done that as well. I've had where, you need to take these pills. And then I'm like, well, after day 3, after, week 3, I feel good. And I feel like I'm back to normal. I don't need to take it anymore. I don't have to take it anymore. I'm doing well. So I say all that to say that there is help. Dr. Janet is on the back end taking notes, and so if I said something, she's going to be able to back it up with scientific facts and different things like that. But I would just say, as this former player who played in the NFL, it doesn't give me any advantage or disadvantage. We all are people, and we all have things that we deal with. And I'm humble enough, or at least I think I'm humble enough to realize that everyone's issue is there's no one greater or no one worse than yours. Everyone has some problems. Everyone has issues, or everyone has things that they need to talk to. Any one of you who are listening could be the person that's speaking. I just happen to be in that position because I play football that may draw some attention, but we all have some stories to tell, and we may all have some things that we're dealing with, and we may all have some issues that we don't know. We've tried everything and we're trying to figure out what's the right path. First thing you got to do is take the first step, take that first walk. I'm not self-promoting, but I do this thing called Life Lessons from the Gym. And I always, one of the first videos I did was say the hardest thing to go and to talk about physical fitness, the hardest thing is that first step. You'll look at the gym, you hear about weight loss, you'll see people working out, you see them all looking good, then you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, man, I can't do this. I'll never be able to do this. And you'll start self-talking yourself out of it. I'll never do this. They look like they're perfect. They got it all going on. Look at them, they're all sweating, they're all beautiful. The hardest thing is taking the first step in that gym. Most people don't do it. Take that first step. And a lot of times some people will take that first step, but they'll try it on their own and they'll try to figure out how to do it by themselves. And a lot of times you may need a trainer to help you out, to get you at least patterned in the right direction. But the hardest thing is to take the first step. And that's the 80-20 rule, I believe. 80% of the people will talk and will look and will think about it and will make motions and say pretty words and all that stuff. 20% of people actually step over and open up the door and walk in the gym and say, here, I'm here to try it out. And that's what I urge anyone in this audience who's listening to me to do is to, if you have something, whether it be small, big, there's no too small, there is no too big. Take that first step and to just say, hey, I'd just like to talk to you. It's not even saying I need help. It's just saying, hey, I like to talk. Maybe this is the right thing. Maybe this isn't the wrong thing. You can be the judge of that, but take that first step. I've had to do it. A lot of players have had to do it, and a lot of players don't do it. And we're losing more and more athletes all the time because they don't do it. We're losing more and more families are breaking up because they don't do it. Generations are being destroyed because they don't do it. Things have been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And it gets so much so that we think that that's normal when it's not normal. So take those first steps. So I'm kind of sound like Begging Kenny, the old begging football player. And I can't make myself cry on cue. But I do know from reality that it does work and it does help. It's helped me out tremendously in the last year of speaking to a counselor to talk to him about some of the issues that I've been dealing with. And the hardest thing for me was to break that wall, to say, I do need some help. So anyhow, I'm gonna throw it off to Dr. Janet to pick up a little bit, and then I may jump back in because I like to talk. But I'm gonna throw it to her, and so she'll give you some clinical perspective on it. I'm more here on the personal side, and hopefully, I try to. If you knew me personally, I try to never put myself on a pedestal. I've always been that person who say, you know what, I've been to that on the other side of it. I'm not the super football player who refused to give an autograph because I think I'm that good. I'm the person on this side of it who is a father who has kids and his kids want somebody's autograph and they take the time to give them the autograph. And my kids feel like they're the greatest thing in the world. Or me being a football player and taking my dad to the Pro Bowl and seeing this 60-some-year-old man become a little kid because he got a chance to meet his idol. And that person treated my dad with so much respect. I have no choice but to do the same thing. I try to treat everybody with respect because I know that feeling. I know that feeling of fear. I know that feeling of, you get judged by your size, your looks, by who you are, your position, where you work, all that stuff. You get judged by that and you feel like that's who I am. But also know that you can cross over and step over. So with that, Dr. Janet, I'm gonna shut up for a minute and I will let you speak.
Thank you, Ken. Actually, you're going to be speaking sooner than you think, because before I dive in, I actually have a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the first question is, much like the law firm, demanding hours, pressure, environment that is probably not warm and fuzzy, much like what you faced in your 11 years of the pros and even in college. What advice do you give to folks about how to handle pressure?
Well, okay, so great question. Pressure is, you find what works for you. But for me, it was music. I would listen to Enya, John Tesh. This is kind of funny. So it may sound racist, but I'm a Black man. I say I'm listening to Enya. Everybody's like, what? You listen to Enya? But it was mellow. It mellowed me out. Some people like to cook. Working out in the gym was my way of, instead of being aggressive towards somebody, I would just work out and I would pound the weights. And after you get a good workout, then you start relaxing. Sometimes it's just calling up my buddies. I have some buddies that we say the same joke. It's been 20 some years now. And we get on the phone and we laugh at the same joke over and over again. We don't talk about anything serious. Every once in a while we'll do, but most of the time it's just laughing. Laughter is a great medicine. So some of those things that are ways to get away. Sometimes it's just getting by yourself. And I did this with my wife, just learning to say thank you, gratitude. Just starting to say, once a week we try to sit down and we'll say thank you. Hey, thank you for just being such a good wife. Thank you for cooking the meals. You enjoy cooking. Thank you for doing that, because I know it takes effort. And when you start doing that, you start realizing that things aren't as bad, and you have a lot more to be grateful for than not. So those are some of the methods I've tried, but everybody's different. Find what works for you. You may like to be an artist. I actually also like to write. That's kind of one of my novels has there's some fights in there, but if you read it, those are the same nights or days I got in a fight with my wife. So I just put it into the story. So, there may be outlets, find that outlet and then just try to use it.
It sounds like the first thing is to recognize you're stressed and then have a plan or know something that's your own go-to that helps you alleviate the stress.
Yeah. And it's if you start watching yourself, or maybe you can ask a friend, what is it when you get stressed out, and then what do you do? And then how do you recognize it? Because sometimes it's hard to recognize it yourself. And then the other part is, what do you do? What do you enjoy doing beyond that? Playing video games, whatever it is.
So along those lines, what do you wish that someone had seen in you in terms of maybe recognizing that you needed some help? And what do you think, how would you have wanted that first step, their approach, to look like towards you?
It wasn't so much, I think I was frustrated because people didn't understand me when I in turn had to understand myself. So, you can get mad at the world because they don't understand who you are, but ultimately you got to do some research and start figuring out who you are, because you can only help a person who's willing to help themselves. And so I think if I had to do it over again post football, I would have spoken to counselors more to try to talk about some of these issues. I think I would have gotten to the root of a lot of my issues early on, as opposed to a lot later on with all the baggage that came with it. So, but I had to get to a point where I was willing, like I said, kind of preach, take that first step of saying, I don't know, this is what I need to do.
So along those lines, this is my last question, and then I'm sure you'll have more to say. What stopped you from getting help earlier? I mean, you're in NFL, you have insurance, you have money, what stopped you from getting the help that you knew you needed?
Well, just that you got, you have the insurance, you have the money, but you have the image, and you're afraid. Fear, and fear knows no size, no boundaries, but you're fearful someone's going to see you walking into the doctor's office. You're fearful someone's going to hear about this and write a book about you while you're playing. You're fearful that someone's going to use that against you to take your position or take your job. As I'm sure in the law firm or whatever position you play, you're fearful that someone's going to use that as a weapon against you. With old habits, lifestyle, like when my wife said she needed some help, it's like, no, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to embarrass me. The embarrassment. You feel like you're going to be embarrassed that I'm Ken Harvey and my wife is seeking some mental help. That's impossible. So fear of embarrassment, because you don't want that. So those are some of the reasons that I didn't step out right away. And when I talk about those three things, one is lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge and knowing, one, that the doctors, that's a confidentiality. They can't say anything beyond that, that you're walking into a safe environment. So try to educate yourself a little bit.
Wow. Well, thank you for being so honest and telling your story. What I want to do is just talk a little bit about where we are managing mental health for yourselves, and certainly where mental health is in America. And right now we are certainly at a crisis point. If you look at the past 21 months from COVID-19 and what I like to call COVID-16-19, with the racial reckoning that has happened in this country, And then on top of that, as parents or as partners, some of you may be in the sandwich generation, taking care of your own parents, just managing yourselves in what seems to be just this chaotic, unpredictable environment. How do you do that? Even prior to COVID-19, mental health in terms of people, adults reporting stress, those levels were going up. Prior to COVID-19, we know that half of all Americans have a diagnosable mental condition. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a mental illness, something like depression or schizoaffective disorder or bipolar, something like that, which impacts your work and your ability to love and relationships and all those factors. But in terms of having a diagnosable mental disorder, adjustment disorder, a grief reaction, maybe a subclinical depression, substance use, those factors are there. So we have been struggling. And Workplace Intelligence and Oracle did a study that showed that almost 80% of all workers reported that 2020 was the worst work year of their lives. So, we're at a time where most of us spend more time at work than we do at home. And now even at home, in terms of whether you're on your sofa and your desk and office, those blurred lines create more tension, more anxiety, presumably more depression. So what can you do? What can you do for yourselves? What can you do to recognize that in your colleagues, knowing, as Jamie said, that you had a suicide there earlier, what can you do? So, I think what Ken said in terms of self-awareness is key, recognizing how you feel, what your moods are, and not your thoughts, but your moods. And certainly if you have a sadness or depression that lasts longer than 2 weeks, we all get sad. There are things we all have to face, but if it lasts longer than 2 weeks and interrupts how you work, your relationships, how you're thinking, your motivation, then you should go and talk to someone and be evaluated. Because what we have to do is lose this stigma, which is a lot of about what Ken was saying about what it means to seek mental health help. The World Health Organization says that there is no physical health without mental health, and your brain is in your body. So much like if you had diabetes or high blood pressure or hurt your arm and you get help, we have to think about our brain in the same way. Your brain is 2% of your body weight and utilizes 25% of your blood glucose and oxygen. So when you work out and you're getting good blood flow, you're eating mindfully, you are sending nutrients to your brain. And the first organ in your body that is the recipient of any nutrients that you eat, any food that's not so good for you that you eat, is your brain. And it's your brain during these times that will allow you to make the best decisions about what you need to do, and will allow you to stay in a resilient or a growth mindset that allows you to face the reality of the challenges that you have working at a law firm, or the reality that, in my case, I work with people who are criminal justice involved, under resource, that, it's the same brain, different body, but the same challenges that people have. And it's your brain that can help you get in and out and navigate those challenges. Because when you are see people who are different, other, it could be even, immigrant status or accent, somebody wearing a hoodie, somebody who's a different gender, sexual identity, sexual orientation, different race or ethnicity, your brain screams other, right? So we are living in a state of constant threat, right? And that threat, that fear that Ken talked about, has been used historically, evolutionarily, to help us manage and mitigate. But our brain wants us to be safe, but not afraid. And so it's up to us individually to recognize when we're living in such a threatful state. And that threat can be demanding hours at work. That threat can be a boss who doesn't listen to you, or a colleague that you don't get along with. That threat can be within your own household. It's up to you to be aware that you feel in constant siege. And the best thing for that, knowing, again, the choices that you have made working in a law firm, the best thing to that is to really create times that interrupt that flow of stress. So for Ken, it's listening to Enya, which is a funny thought, but or finding out what helps you relax. And for some, it may be ending meetings 5 minutes early so that you can, walk around or jog around or listen to whatever you want to, or empty your cup, kind of metaphorically, and fill it for the next meeting. But it's up to you to interrupt that so that you can manage the stress that you have. And, one thing living in Florida, where I can look out my window. I lived in New York for almost 25 years and see palm trees that, bend but don't break. That's the same way our bodies are. We were built to adapt to stress. We are built to be vulnerable and bounce back. We were built to withhold whatever and withstand whatever pressures come towards us. But the main way that we do that is to recognize it and then allow ourselves to create release valves, if you will, that interrupt the constant pressure and stress that we have. Even the word stress comes from a mechanical term, engineering. We are not machines, we are human beings. And so we need that interruption so that we can recover our bodies, which happens by eating mindfully, exercising, thinking positively, reminding ourselves how we got through difficult times. It's about using evidence-based information. Facts matter. Our brain does not like uncertainty. And when faced with uncertainty, our brain will take us down this roller coaster ride to try to come up with an answer that we can't, which can lead to more anxiety and stress. We know that stress in the brain, it begins and ends in the brain. And in the brain, it will send signals to every organ in your body to either turn on or turn off. So it makes your heart beat faster. If you think about that, fear, flight, or freeze, in terms of that threat, that lizard brain that many of us stay in, which is just this constant state of anxiety or feeling under siege, which is not natural. If we recognize that and allow ourselves to flow through to our midbrain, which is where our memories and emotions are, to our frontal cortex, which is metacognition happens, thinking about thinking, and that allows us to create a top-down approach and solve issues that we may have. That is the goal. So recognizing that you are stressed is key, and creating those times to recover is really important. Understanding how resilient we are, and that our bodies, if we use them the right way in our brain, that we really can withstand anything. So it's about recovery and reflection. It's about evidence-based information. It's about self-care, which I know probably is the antithesis of something at a law firm. But again, you are all human beings, and you need to take that time to make your doctor's appointments, mammogram, pap smears, PSAs, talking to someone if you need to, going for walks, scheduling times in a day where you have nothing planned and just seeing what happens. Like, you're allowed to do that. And so that self-care is really important. And as the great poetress Audre Lorde said, self-care is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservative, and that's an act of political warfare. And for many of you, taking a day off, where it's not planned, where you don't have a doctor's appointment and have to do something for your kids, can feel like it's a threat, can feel like warfare. But it's up to you to reframe that and understand you have to take the best care of yourself that you can, because what you don't want to do is get to retirement age and have a heart attack, which happens, right? Or get to some age, and because of chronic stress, your body has diabetes, high blood pressure, cancers. Stress triggers the immune system, and the inflammatory pathways that lead to cancers. So, and certainly can create anxiety and depression. So it's up to you to resolve that. You want to engage with a sense of purpose. Your purpose should be aligned with what you're working on in the law firm, because that can create stress. And in these days where we know that stress levels are going up, and people are emotionally exhausted. There's that emotional labor where people feel depleted, they're unhappy, they feel unseen, they're tired, and then they are unhealthy. You are the one in charge of managing that. And included in that is recognizing the role of your emotions and moods, and when you may feel stressed or certainly depleted. And then lastly is the notion of connectedness and touch, right? And certainly, most people don't want to be on another Zoom meeting, but the reality is, like, we are meant to touch, we're meant to hug, we're meant to see each other face to face. And the same risk factor in terms of that smoking and drinking contributes to is that from a health standpoint, when you are chronically lonely and chronically isolated, it's the same risk factor as drinking and smoking because of stress levels. So managing and mitigating stress is extremely important. and what you can do with your colleagues when you see someone who you may be worried about, who may put in 15-hour days and suddenly they're not, or they disappear, you can't reach them, or they're crying uncontrollably, or seem anxious, or over drinking, coping in ways like that. You can ask them, are you okay? You can listen to what's going on, but in your back pocket, you need resources, EAP, or someone, that you can refer them to. Understanding, I understand the competitiveness, I understand confidentiality, but, for most of us, we have like one chance at getting it right in this life. And we want people to be able to pursue their potential using their brain, using their bodies to the best of their ability. So notice your colleagues, and not just your colleagues, notice your staff, notice people who work around you, notice people who are sweeping the floors, notice people who open doors for you, who bring you food. Like, just use that self-awareness so that you show more empathy, not only for yourself, but for other people, because no matter what, my opinion, no matter what your level is in the firm, you're a community and you're all together. So looking out for each other is key. And so when you see colleagues who may be suffering, just ask them if they're okay, listen, and be willing to help them get the help that they need. Because a lot of people are struggling. And if you are listening and you're struggling, you're not alone, but the help is there. EAP employee assistance programs are confidential. They not only can help you, they can help your family. And so utilize them. And really, I'm terrible at football analogies, as Ken and I were talking earlier, but I mean, it's really about being a winner. And if you look at neuro-linguistic programming, two principles from that. Number one, your brain wants you to win. Behind every behavior is a positive intention, and there is no inner enemy. You are not broken. Things may have happened to you. Some of us have this gremlin, this negative voice that's like kind of perched on our shoulder when we want to try something new or do something different, that says, you can't do that, you don't deserve that, you're not good at this, blah, blah, blah. You can destroy it like Ken did as a linebacker with those quarterbacks. You can destroy it by questioning it and really putting yourself first. So your brain wants you to win, but the energy that it takes and the recognition is where the real work happens. So educate yourself about resources at your firm, pay attention to how you're feeling and thinking, and take care of yourself. Ken, you look like you have something to say.
Yeah, I'm just going to say two things. One, mental health versus mental illness. So, a lot of times we look at it as they're all the same. Mental health is like going to the gym, jogging, doing whatever. It's saying, I'm going to be proactive so that I can take care of myself, so that those things won't happen. Mental illness may mean you may need some medication, you may need some help, but the two are the same. So it's more about taking care of yourself. Ultimately, if you find something's wrong, take care of yourself. Second thing, if you talk to someone or someone who may need that help, be more of a friend than accusatory. People will push off if you're like, hey, you need some help, or you need this, and that. A big part of it is listening, trying to understand, and being a shoulder, they hear, and then kind of ease them into it. And you may have to be, if you really care about that person, you may have to be so proactive that you say, look, I'm gonna go to a class. You want to come with me? Something like that can make a big difference, as opposed to saying that you need to do this. There was a question. I know you answered one of them. There was another question that said, when I ultimately reached out to a friend for help, were they understanding or not? Most of my friends were, because half of them had problems as well. But a lot of them were. Some of the ones that I was probably more afraid of to talk to, and I put up the wall around it, so I didn't talk to them. And then when I finally did, I found out that they were like, wow, actually, it's a friend of mine now. I put up this wall, 4 or 5 years, didn't really open up to him. Now I'm talking to him and I'm realizing as we're talking, he had some issues as well and things that he was dealing with. And I never knew because I had put up this wall like, oh, he's not going to do this and that. So I think, people will be understanding, but you have to have it in your mind, whether or not they understand you or not, you're doing the right thing because you're seeking, you're stepping out, you're pushing forward, as opposed to whether or not they get it, because people are going to let you down. No one's perfect. No one's going to have always the right answers. No one's going to always hit it 100%. But just know that, a lot of people will try to put you in the right direction.
Thanks for saying that about the mental health component, because certainly mental illness falls under mental health, and there are things that you can do to have good, positive mental health. At the same time, you could work out every day and eat and do everything right and still have depression or anxiety. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that you need to get help about it. And then the other thing I would say is your friends, your colleagues are not your therapist. And so it's really, really critical that when you recognize that it's just too overwhelming, that you lose the stigma about what it means to seek mental health help and get the help that you need, because it is out there. And I just can't say enough about utilizing EAP and human resources. It's confidential, it's there for you, and they will direct you to the help that you need.
So I don't know how much time we have, but I go back to football. This is a football analogy. There was a linebacker. There's the guy that I trained with. I'm sure you don't mind me using his name. Guy named Monty Coleman. We work out together. Sometimes you need that person to be like, you're struggling you're trying to get the weight up, and that voice is like, come on, man, get this thing. And all of a sudden you got that extra, you push it up, and you're like, whoa. But by his voice and his strength alone, it was just what you needed to get past that point where you thought you couldn't. Sometimes we have to be that friend to that person in need. Sometimes you may have to be a little bit harsh and say, come on, man, you can do this. I know you can do this. Rub them on the shoulder. You got this thing. We have to be the cheerleader sometimes, but sometimes that's what people need. And that's what friends do. I know, are we, Jamie,
No,
or how we doing?
I think that's a good way to really kind of end this conversation. And Ken and I are here if you have more questions. Certainly you can put them into the chat, or you can, or not the Q&A, and you can also send them to Jamie and she can get them to us if you have a personal question for Ken or for myself. But really, CHR, CEAP as your buddy, and think about Ken's voice in your ear when you need to do something, because you can do it, right?
Think about this big old ugly linebacker face. Got big eyes, we're looking at you, and we'll come out and get you like, you can do this thing. We need that sometimes, man. We just, I've learned that some people, we all have our different emotional levels. Some people really love the rah, rah, rah. Some people want the book smarts. Show me scientific facts where it works. Some people want organizational. Give me some rules and say, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I'll do it. People are different, and you come at them in different ways. But the main goal is to know that there are people that care about you regardless. I got no skin in the game and talking to you. My goal in life is, how can I help somebody? And everything that I've lived my life with, maybe God has been using that in me to help somebody else. So if I can help you, if you want to reach out or whatever, I'm open. You may get more than you bargained for. I may start crying on your shoulder. So don't feel afraid.
But telling, sharing stories, yours honestly is inspirational. I think at 17, you tried to kill yourself. Really tried to kill yourself with, drinking lighter fluid and doing all those things. But then you still went on and went to UC Berkeley, and then went on to the pros. And now you have your family, and now you're sharing your story. And it really exemplifies what's possible, but we just have to keep pushing through. So thank you for sharing and being so open. We need more men, especially to share what's going on with them.
Jamie.
No, thank you both. I think that this was a really important topic to discuss, and I thank you, Ken, for sharing your story and being vulnerable in that regard, because that, for somebody who has a lot of strength, I think it takes equally as much strength to tell a story, especially to a lot of people that you don't know. So I commend you for doing that, and I thank you for doing that. And Dr. Janet, it's always nice to hear your insight. I think that it's important for people to have self-awareness when they have issues that they're dealing with, to know that, to understand that. And then part of this conversation is really to reduce the stigma. So when people need help, that they reach out. There are resources here. So if people have questions, they certainly can forward them over to anyone on the mental health committee. We can then channel that to either of you, but I thank you both for your time. I enjoyed this. I hope I speak for everybody when I say thank you, and I hope that people enjoyed it as well. I think there are a lot of good takeaways here for people. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.